Historic Preservation meeting for the City of Vero Beach, Florida. Before we start, we're one man short in the House today. Since the last time we met, we've lost our planning director, Tim McGarry. We're going to miss Tim's kind face and his quiet disposition here. He never lost his temper dealing with all of our dilemmas. He was really a joy to work with. He quietly and cheerfully endureth all. Maybe we could even spend like 1 minute just quietly thinking about Tim. We could maybe even stand would be, I think, appropriate for a man that gave us 12 years. Thank you, everybody. And Tim, if it gets too peaceful, you're always welcome back to help us out on the side. All right, approval of minutes. We had a really abbreviated meeting on September the 13th. Anna couldn't make it. I had one of my famous migraines. We only had Mr. Erickson and Mr. Yulian here. Can we still approve the minutes, or should we put that off?
They can still be approved.
Two people to...
Well, the minutes are available for, to review, so...
But we only had two people here that created the minutes.
That's
okay.
That's okay.
Okay. All right, do I have a motion to approve minutes?
So moved.
Second?
A second.
All right, those minutes are approved. All 12 of them. Under new business, we have Anna here, and she is going to give us her report on the CLG grant survey and the progress being made with the latest CRS technology, cultural resource surveyor, buzzwords. So we'll...
Good morning, everyone.
Hit it.
All right, so it's been a couple months. I've had to rest a little bit since the survey ended, but I think I was back here in almost less than a year ago, the last early spring, late winter, and we were getting the historic survey project underway. Just for everyone's benefit and our new planning director that's in the room, about 2 years ago, the Historic Preservation Commission applied for a grant, a $35,000 grant, which they received from the Department of State Historic Preservation Office. To work on updating the historic survey, but really it was about piloting a new software that was being developed by the National Park Service. And we began implementing that project last year. The National Park Service has been piloting the software in a number of states. There was an article that I saw in Alexandria, Virginia. That's where the idea was born. The Historic Preservation Commission had been struggling to update their historic resource inventory. They had applied for a grant previously and failed to receive it. And we're looking for a really new dynamic idea that would catch the state's attention, but also give the Historic Preservation Commission a tool to update their own historic survey in hopes of helping the process and garnering more support for local designations. The grant project started in July, officially in July of 2017. A lot of the first few months were taken up with contract administration, and then finally would get started in January of 2018. The project location that was chosen for the pilot study was the proposed cultural arts village, since that was planning to be affected by possibly a new zoning district. And that area is located in the historic downtown area. If you see on your map, the area in red, it's actually known as the Edgewood Addition subdivision and the Second Addition subdivision. And the two areas that are in purple and in blue were already updated. Their historic resource survey was updated in 2008. So this was going to cover another quadrant in the downtown area. So the timeline, as I mentioned, the project really got going in January through March. The State Historic Preservation Office did require that there were 25 historic buildings inventoried using the existing method, because we couldn't guarantee that the new method was going to work with their data system. And so I did volunteer to document 25 historic buildings using the current methods, and that was done from January through March. There was historic research that took place before that as well, and during that time period. And then in April, we were able to do some recruitment and onboarding, because the idea was to use volunteers to engage the community. And we did get 10 great volunteers, all age groups, men and women. And it took a while. We worked with the city, worked with Gail, developed a process and HR, and had formal applications. The volunteers had to complete a computer security training, each one too, online training. And by May, we were ready for some formal training in how to conduct a historic inventory or historic survey of a building. We did a classroom session where we went over, I'll show you some of the items we went over on how to read a building, learning about architectural styles, also learning about the historic context of the neighborhood. And then we began to do some field training towards late May, early June. It took a long time for the National Park Service to deploy the software. They were working with a local GIS contractor, and they had to make their updates during May, and they deployed the software in late May, early June. And again, we had our GIS department, we couldn't have done it without them, and Jim Kirkpatrick, and he was able to give staff and myself some training, and then we were able to conduct field work with the volunteers as well. We did encounter some hardship with the software in June, and the software had to be redeployed again in early July. So there were a lot of stops and starts, and it was a little clunky, I will say, trying to use the software, but we documented what we did, gave them back some good feedback, and they're working on updates still for the project. And after we submitted our final report, and the grant closed out in about September, and payment was made to everyone, which really was the NAPC, the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. They are now piloting the software in Coral Gables, and we are still working with the state to find out how the knowledge transfer went, because the data get uploaded to them, and they have to now take their database and kind of curtail it to accept the information, and we're still in that process. I'm waiting for a new update from the state. So this was our crew of volunteers. Again, we did recruiting with flyers that were posted to the city website. Thank you, Tammy. And also on social media. And in the end, again, we had 10 volunteers. This is some of them on our first day of training out in the field. We did start to document buildings even in the commercial area just for training. And then, like I said, we provided a historic context information so everyone would have a general background. And just so you know, some of these photos were taken by Steve Erickson, who's on the dais. I provided them with a lot of historical research that had already been completed, old Sanborn maps that told us what buildings were existing at the time, but they did not have to write any of the historic or architectural context or significant paragraphs. It was just a matter of doing the inventory of the architectural features. We also looked at how to read a building, so you could look at a building today and try to determine what style it may have been and the changes over time, like this one in Osceola Park. A style book was developed as well that was really helpful for the volunteers, especially because not everyone had a planning or architecture background. And so it gave them a visual to look for. This field guide, this guidebook was designed, strictly based on the historic architecture in Vero Beach and in River County. So it was very local and to Florida as well. And it just provided some basics, and now the planning department too, and you all have that as a resource as well for folks that come in and may be interested in historic designation or learning more about their building. And then these were some of the historic styles that we did see. These are the buildings today, and part of the guidebook, again, speaks to the historic architecture styles and a few of the details that go with each style as well. So hopefully this will be a nice resource for the city. So there was a learning curve with the volunteers, but everyone seemed to pick it up pretty quickly. And in the end, I will say that I felt as though there was a lot of good feedback from folks who had never really even been involved in historic preservation before, and they just said, we will never look at a building the same way again. So I think as an exercise for the community and engaging the community, even if you're using a paper form, it's a great way to engage them and help grow those historic preservation values. Like I said, we couldn't have done this without the City of Vero Beach GIS staff and the systems. We really have a great resource there. So once the training had completed, we were in the field. This is basically, we were taking photographs and doing documentation of each building, and a point would be created for each building that was surveyed. We did not, because of the glitches with the software at the time and the redeployment and the late start, we did not complete the survey of the neighborhood, and then the heat came. The summer heat, and it just wasn't conducive to going out there. So the volunteers would like to finish what they started, and that's the plan. They're going to finish that study area, probably starting in January. There's a few that want to start now as well, and that's perfectly fine. But you'll see the green dots are those that they're complete, the record's complete, I've reviewed it, I've approved it. That was the other part of this, that the state required that historic preservation, someone with that background, really look at that documentation and for correctness. Again, because we were using lay folks for volunteers. And then, so what was nice is this is the dashboard in the software that's behind the scenes, and that I could go in and you can open up a record and you can make those corrections. And it also gives you a synopsis of the different buildings that were surveyed. In this case, it gives you a date range and also a status of what's complete and what's not. And that's that. So as far as the outcomes of the project, how we see this, it basically created a tool and a process for updating Florida Master Site File records and the local historic inventory, as is indicated in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, is one of the Board Commission's responsibilities. Also, it can help inform future planning decisions, a completed survey in that area, depending on how the planning department moves forward with the cultural arts village in that area. Also, we talked about community engagement. That was a real huge success there. It also provided the City of Vero's planning department, you've established now a grant history with the State Historic Preservation Office. So you've applied, you've received funds, and you've followed through with the project. So if you were to come up with another idea, you have a good reputation, so to say, now with the state and those grant folks. And then in the future, again, my volunteer hours, but I do see a national register, national register district there, which we kind of suspected previous. We've talked to a lot of the property owners that in that area as well, and the Cultural Arts Village leadership team, which full disclosure, I am a member of, and they have interest in that as well. So as long as that interest continues, and those are the goals of the planning department as well, I'll be glad to continue with that project. And finally, another outcome of this survey will be a story map that can be worked on by myself with Jim Kirkpatrick, and just creating a map that could be posted on the city, and maybe highlight a few of the houses in the neighborhood, showing some of the data that was collected and some of the history that was researched, so that people can access the website and kind of take a little self-guided tour. And then on my own too, and with the Cultural Arts Village team, I did give, and for the Vero Centennial, I did give a historic tour of Edgewood. I was able to spend August, September doing a lot of research, and met a few of the previous owners in the neighborhood who were kind enough to share their story growing up there and connect me to other folks who grew up there in the history. And I'll be giving another tour on November the 10th at 10 o'clock's the tree dedication in the Arts Village, and then the tour will follow just after that. And I hope to continue those during season as well, just to raise awareness about the history of the neighborhood. But as you can see, this project just is for that neighborhood, but it could be applied, to other areas, historic areas of the city. And that's really it. Those are our partners on the left. We worked with the Division of State Historic Resources, our city, also with the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, and the National Park Service. And it was a really good experience. And once again, I just want to complete what we started, and that's it. Are there any questions?
Good job, Anna. I have some of these flyers that you used for your walk. It was wonderful. I was able to take in the tail end of it, and if you'd like to look at them.
Yeah, we developed handouts for 8 of the buildings for the tours. I have about 12 in total. So the tour idea someone asked me in mid-August if I'd give a historic tour of the neighborhood, and which was a great impetus for me to dig in and dive in and do the research. Sometimes you need that push when you're volunteering. And so the outcome was great. We have a nice synopsis of 12 or so of the houses in that neighborhood. Again, those could be used for historic designation reports if someone's interested as well. So I'll make sure Gail has those copies. And yeah.
And did you say you went into Osceola Park yet? Or planning to?
No, so Osceola Park was updated in 2008. I actually was working as a consultant there then at that time, and I did complete the survey of Osceola Park, and it was the greater area. It was actually from 16th Street to Route 60, and then 27th Avenue south to 20th Avenue. So there was a huge big block of areas.
I just bought a house there.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Built in 1941.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there is a survey on file. It's actually posted on the website too, a survey report.
Yeah, I haven't even done my research yet. It just happened.
So Gail has all the records, and you can get with her. But, mainly, again, staff, Gail Lafferty, you were great, wonderful help, and Tracy Firsch as well. We have people checking in and out tablets, because the planning department, we were able to buy 4 tablets for the project as well. And like I said, with Jim Kirkpatrick, and obviously without Tim, it would have never happened as well. So very grateful.
If you were to expand to the project, such a nice model, such a nice success, if you were to expand to other areas, what would be your preferences, and what would the process be?
Really great question. I think going back to that map, I'll show you at the beginning, but likely the historic downtown would benefit the most, that area. When I say that, because this is the basis for future planning decisions. And right now, there is no National Register District there. And the National Register District will establish some tax incentives. Oops, I passed it because I was too busy talking. There we go. That purple area, I guess I wasn't indicated correctly. The commercial part of that purple area is the historic downtown that we know of, and that was not surveyed. Only the residential part of the original town of Vero was surveyed back in resurveyed in 2008, excuse me. So I'd recommend the commercial area of the historic downtown, and then as long as the homeowners are supportive, McCanish Park. Those would be my recommendations. And that's really where the city of Vero began. The town of Vero was the purple area. And then in 1916, south was Edgewood. And then 1917, west was Osceola Park. And the 20s was McCanish Park. But looking at how we're developing and how downtown is now a success, and there's so much interest in it, there's really no balance in regards to development and redevelopment there. So looking forward, there will probably be more pressure on all of those areas for demolitions and redevelopment. And so getting that documentation down at the very least would be wise. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
I'm in the blue. I'm excited.
Well, I can't wait to find out. Do you know what address, or do you share?
1825 21st Avenue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know it. Great windows. I fought to save those windows.
Yeah. They don't open.
Yeah, they don't. They can be operable. They can be operable again.
Yeah, that system is just such an improvement over the old method of just finding the money and paying an agency to do it. It's just so much more.
And it will still need to be qualified, obviously, by a historic preservation professional. When the state is involved, they're going to require that as well. So this is new to them too, and they had some questions and reservations, but they were willing to work with the software program because it was the National Park Service. But I think as a basic tool for the community and for you all, if there's a historic designation and gathering the information that's needed for the report, it's going to be really helpful. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Good job getting those volunteers. That's awesome. I think the community engagement part is one of the most valuable parts of this whole thing.
And I think you could do a demonstration
really cool.
or a one day, I think you could do it in many ways to just engage the community, especially in season too, and show them what history we have. So, thank you.
Thanks, Anna. So your original target area was McCanish Park because of the Cultural Arts Village. Is that why you switched to Edgewater?
I believe that was a Preservation Commission decision that we chose McCanish Park for the original grant.
Okay, I just wondered about that. I don't recall that. If we move on to old business, our primary goal to review is local designation. We have 3 designations in the pipeline at the moment, 2 in Osceola Park, 1 in Original Town. One is 1915 23rd Avenue, 2315 18th Avenue, and 2026 19th Street. These are Victoria Gould's, Linda and Stephen Hillman's home, and the Landers' home, otherwise known as the Mills House. So most of us are familiar with these properties. And all 3 of these owners have expressed a desire to have help, some assistance from one of us, someone here, to get them through the process. And they all thought it would be a grand idea, especially since they know each other well, to just do it kind of simultaneously. So I don't know how we could arrange that, but certainly if they all agreed to meet up at one of these places, and perhaps I I was hoping you'd weigh in. Perhaps Anna could work.
I'm just getting my house.
Oh, perhaps Anna could coach a commission member that would be willing to work with them one day.
Well, again, because you are the deciding board, you cannot be advisory to them prior to coming before the board.
In case the property becomes one that we have to weigh in on. Even when it comes to something like filling out forms.
Correct.
So they would have to come to the planning department, or they
Yes.
would have to utilize someone like Anna again.
Yes.
Can we clone you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I guess for the public record, let me introduce myself. I'm
Yes.
Jason Jeffries. I'm the new Planning and Development Director. This is my third day on the job. I'm coming, if you don't mind, I'll take a little time
Jump
to
right in.
Okay, introduce myself. I am originally from Ohio. I have my planning degree from the University of Cincinnati. I've been working in the planning field for about 20 years. I have 20 years of experience. I've worked for the City of Youngstown, City of Cincinnati, City of Houston, and most recently I was working for City of Daytona Beach. And in those jobs I have had, obviously I've done planning, economic development, but I do have historic preservation background experience, and we had historic districts in Daytona Beach, and I worked for our downtown. We had what's called the South Beach Historic District, which projects had to meet the historic guidelines of the city, and we had a CLG board, which I understand there's CLG, your CLG certified, and we had a historic preservation ordinance where any project coming into those areas, had to meet the national interior standards. And as staff, I was the one that took them through that process and then bring them to a board similar to your board for approval. I'm just coming up to speed on all the codes here, so I don't want to slip back and tell you something that might be how they do it in Daytona Beach. But my understanding, I think what you're talking about is designating of a property, designating as historic, and usually there is a process for that.
There's a simple application that they would need to complete, and all they need to do is come into the planning department, and we would be more than happy to help them. It's not a difficult process.
I've heard you say that before, yet I'm listening to three groups of people say that they
I've not
find it
heard from one of
overwhelming.
them about designating their property.
They have gone online and looked at the materials.
We are here Monday through Friday, 8:35.
And we could do this after the meeting, but what we could do is, I think you got three people who want to designate their properties historic.
Yes.
What I'd like to do is meet with them, and we can set up a meeting, and we can go through the process and what they need to do.
I'm just throwing this out there. There seems to be a discrepancy, right? There's people sitting on the board that don't understand what the process is like because they don't have the opportunity to go through the process. I'm in a unique position where I would like to also go through the process because I believe my home qualifies. Would it, one, be possible, and two, be advantageous for me to sit with you along with, the Hillmans and stuff, so that not only do I get to move through the process, but then I have the toolkit that I need in order to digest this process more completely as a board member.
Right. What I would say, a couple things. One, I do want to meet with each, I think because your board kind of falls under our staff responsibility. I'm setting up meetings, I'm having staff set up meetings right now with the planning board, but I also would like to meet with each of you individually, so staff will be contacting you to set up those meetings. Also, in terms of what the process is, we could do a presentation at a future meeting, so it's in the, I'd rather probably do it as a presentation where it's in the public record because you are a board, and we could just kind of do a presentation on the process. I would rather do it at a board meeting.
I think that's a great way to do it, actually. Thank you, Jason, for that idea. However, there's probably one group, the Landers are probably not going to be able to make it because they are just so inconvenienced by life right now. So I don't know if we would ever this is a house that we really, truly want to designate. Was it not the first home in Vero Beach or among the first homes in the neighborhood?
I'm sorry, which house is this, the Landers?
Yes,
Lander,
the Mills
okay.
House, otherwise, AKA Mills House. And I think they were the first people to come home and to come here and express a desire to designate back before we were even ready to do so.
I'm sorry,
It was
just
the
for
house that was
clarification.
pictured on the-
Yes.
I heard you say a couple of things when you were willing to meet with the 3 homeowner kind of people, and then we were talking about us or Megan, and you said you'd rather do that part as a board? I just wasn't clear.
Couple things I want to do.
Okay.
One is I want to meet with each board member just to introduce myself, just understand
got
what
that
your perspectives. That's something I'm going to be doing with all the boards that fall under the planning board responsibility, or the planning department responsibility. In terms of the applicants, because that is a or quasi-judicial process, I think it's best. And as I think Attorney was stating, that's something that really staff should help them through the process, because you're the board that's going to be hearing the decision.
Correct.
So we as staff should really be probably talking to them about and assisting them with the application process. And I can meet with them all together, or we can meet with them each individually. If you're talking about somebody that's maybe inconvenienced, I wouldn't mind just going. I wouldn't mind going to their house and just meeting if they can't make it into City Hall or something. I would do that too.
That's a good clarification,
Yeah.
so I can understand that you could meet with those folks
Right.
separately, but we would also like a presentation here.
Yes,
That would
and
be so
then the
great.
third piece is on
Okay.
the designation process.
Thank you.
I'll make a note of that. Yes, we'll do a presentation on what is the designation process.
Very helpful.
Probably
Thank you.
doing that will probably help me learn. I'm sure it's not too, it's, most cities all follow what is the national standard. There's usually very just nuanced differences, but it'll help me learn just what is the code here at Vero Beach.
I think it will help us as well, because we do continually run into this situation where the process itself is easy, but there's a perception that it's not. So if we can deal with that perception, I think it would be good.
Maybe, Megan, you could go through the steps here. We could use your home to illustrate the
I'd be happy to.
process.
I know both my
And-
husband and I want to, and we haven't really tackled it because we just moved in. But the joke is like, well, my husband was like, well, you should be able to figure this out. I was like, yes, I believe I'm in the position to make it happen.
It's on the chest. Okay.
And I have experience, again, going back to previous sales, we're working with people with going through the process of designating. We had grants that they had grants that they offered, and then of course there are federal grants too. I'm sorry, there's not federal grants, there's tax credit programs that are available to people. So there's sometimes there's an advantage to being designated historic. But I do know that I think that the biggest misconception with people is just because a house is old, it doesn't meet it's historic. There's very specific, and we can go through that. I would be very willing to do a presentation on those standards, and I'm sure that's codified in the city's code because you have to follow those standards. You have to meet the very specific standards to be historic. It's not just based on the age, and that's some of those misconceptions. So when I hear individual houses, I know I've run into this before. Sometimes houses on their own may not qualify, and now you're talking about one that's like the first house in Vero Beach. It might, and I tell you, I'm sorry, I'm going to be using a little bit of experience of Last City, but we had a house actually it didn't qualify individually only because it was like one of the few Queen Anne examples in the city of Daytona Beach. And then when they did the research, the owners did the research, they found that the property was owned by one of the original families of the community. That was very important. And then even there was some national importance. So it's interesting what you find when you do the research on individual homes. The house was the gardener, and like the son of the people ended up out in California and was involved with the development of I want to say Rodeo Drive, but well, it might be Rodeo, one of the Wilshire Drive. So, sort of these national connections. So that's the kind of stuff you'll find. But there's other homes where you have to meet those criteria. They're being either associated with a historic person, the significance of the architecture or a significant event of the community. And sometimes individually, buildings do not meet it, and that's where you sometimes, and that's, I'm sure, Anna would say the same, is that's where then a district, that's then the association as a district comes up.
I think we have a pretty good working comprehension of that.
Okay.
And the thing that we encounter probably the most is homes that no longer have their original historic integrity because they've been tampered with in a way that
Right.
has
And, yeah, I've
reduced
seen
it
that
to
too.
a point where
Right.
it's no longer worth.
And right, this house, I was giving an
pursuing.
example, luckily had not lost
Mill's
its
house is pristine, so we have a number of those still, fortunately. So, how many historic districts did you have in Daytona?
I think we had we had 5 national, I want to say we had 5 or 6 national districts, but we had 2 locally designated districts where they had actual zoning protections. And that's the other thing I'll point out is people go through this process. When they're getting designated, you're putting the city's local policing powers, and you have to go through that rezoning process. You're nodding your head, so that's how it is here, right?
The rezoning,
It's technically a rezoning when you put the designation on it. Because you're putting the city's protections over it.
to meet the criteria
Right.
for the, any improvements.
Right. But then when you're actually designating it, well, this is where I need to come up to speed on this, but usually what I'm familiar with, when you're designating it locally, when you're providing a local designation, you're actually putting certain zoning restrictions on the property, so you're actually technically doing a zoning map amendment on that property.
So your 2 locally designated neighborhoods were also duly designated? They were
Boundaries
federal as
didn't always
well?
necessarily match up because, as again, you're going through that process, it's a rezoning. Some people objected to being placed in that zoning
Were you
district.
there for that process?
For one of them, yes. And I was also was involved in some local individual designations, like I talked about the house and a couple other properties.
I noticed that when I looked at your department, you had a man, Gutierrez, who was down as being your HP liaison.
Yes, so in the planning division, Doug Gutierrez, it was the historic, he was responsible for the historic board. I was in what was called the redevelopment division, and I worked with I was a downtown project manager, but the downtown had a historic district, so I was just, if you want to search their website, you'll see my name on reports all over the place. Go into those, that usually anything involved downtown defaulted to me.
This is what we were told. That was, in fact, probably the only information we had. So that can be wonderful and it can be alarming. So
Of what?
well, the redevelopment, just the word redevelopment.
Oh.
Informed redevelopment, sensitive redevelopment. Yeah.
Redevelopment, I understand, I ran into this in Daytona Beach too. There's a lot of misconceptions about it. It's just, basically, my job there was there was a certain vision for the development, trying to use another word than redevelopment.
That's okay.
For the future development
It doesn't have to be an ugly word.
Downtown, but part of that plan was the preservation of their Beach Street, what was called the Beach Street Retail District, which was a historic district. It's very clear in the plan, and it's carried throughout in the zoning. So it's and if you look through their redevelopment plan in Daytona Beach, and my job was to implement that plan, there were policies and procedures, and we had grant programs to incentivize the preservation of buildings.
Who researched your grant programs? Who gained those grant monies for you? What was that done?
No,
in
this is
your
how we were
department?
using the CRA money.
Oh.
You don't have a
So
CRA, so I don't want to get out there too far, but I'm just telling you, we had grant programs to incentivize, and I wrote those programs.
You did?
For Daytona Beach.
Wow. Okay.
So did we agree that we'll have him come back and give a presentation on how we do go through designating a home? Because I think that'll be very beneficial for the board and the public as well. Is that definitely going to happen?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it is. Why don't we do that when we have interested parties here that have homes that actually have already made the decision? There's no doubt in their minds that they want to designate, and then that way everyone
Well, we'll
can
work with
benefit
those,
from it.
but we'll be, When's your next meeting?
We meet monthly if
Monthly?
we have enough
Well, we can
material
schedule
to
that for
cover.
next month. We'll have that presentation.
All right, thank you.
Awesome.
Great.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Wonderful. So we have, as we're going forward, I'll tell you that we've had some trying times lately because we haven't really had anyone who was ready to help guide resource management, historic cultural resource management. This has really, in a town this size, how big is Daytona? Are you a mite larger than us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're-
Like twice? What are you talking here?
Well, it depends how you count the people, because you got 65,000. Well, you might be some of that, because I understand there's a seasonal aspect of the population here. But, officially 65,000, if you go to the census data. But you're talking 8 million visitors a year because of tourism, and part of that, and I don't even know if those numbers even account the snowbirds that come, that are coming down there, from about Labor Day to Memorial Day.
I know you get traffic.
Right.
On and off the track.
On the record, I'm very enjoying being in Vero Beach, where it's a lot quieter. So don't think I'm bringing Daytona Beach traffic here, I guess.
Yeah,
I will not miss
we
that.
think it's busy now, so, just wait. It's even better. Well, wonderful. It's nice to know that you have that background and that training, and we again have really needed someone to do that, and we've spent much of this year, for instance, paying attention to one of our resources that was never appropriately handled in the past, so that when it came to the public's and the current council's attention, we had to just do like ongoing damage control. Everyone went through this huge emotional upheaval, and at the end of the day, you had to sit back and say, if only this had been properly handled to begin with and identified and managed, this would have been an easy decision today. It would have been, everyone would have been pleasant about it. It would have been a no-brainer. It would have taken one meeting instead of 6 months. So that's really what we need, is somebody to identify our cultural and historic assets that are remaining, and to figure out a way to include them in Vero's future and to treat them appropriately. So that's...
Historic preservation, I know some people look at economic development, this is my perspective, economic development and historic preservation, if they're clashing, but in my view, it can be part of the economic development of the community.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what we're doing in Daytona, especially in downtown Daytona Beach.
As long as those two factions are informed, it's good, as long as they don't happen independently. Wonderful. Well, we're happy to have you. We're sad to lose Tim, but we're happy to have you here so quickly.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jason?
No.
Thank you for spending your time with us today.
No problem.
Back to designation, just quickly here. So we have these homes moving on. All three of the parties, okay, have decided. Let's talk about marketing our designation process, or just how do we captivate people, additional people. Of course, having designated homes helps in itself develop enthusiasm. It seems prudent to, when we've discussed this, dovetail exposure to our information, what we come up with additionally with centennial festivities. When people are already embracing history here, that seems like a ripe time to do it. For instance, the Edgewood walk that Anna did, that might have been one moment that was lost here that we could have done something. We discussed putting an article in the mid-weekly newspaper section. Anna and I have chatted about this. We've discussed posters and banners. We've mentioned placing materials, brochures, banners, posters in the Main Street office, on the bulletin boards at Home Depot, Lowe's, Habitat, to take advantage of the fact that the U.S. is pretty obsessed with redoing homes, with home makeovers right now. I can't keep track of all the shows. So there, we could place them in an area of visible foot traffic at the heritage events. So we need to discuss refining whatever our visual aids are going to be, and how do we brand our marker and the process and make it a sought
Well, I think we'll be
after.
more informed after we get the presentation too, about what the actual process looks like.
Certainly, but if we're talking about just advertising it, our print, our media
Right.
print, so how are we going, and when? I would think, since we've already kicked off our centennial year, it would be prudent to try to address this now and get something going.
Well, I feel like media print is dying, and I think anything that we try to promote or do would be more effective via an online action. More people are going to view things online. Most brochures that get picked up, especially in the Main Street office, get discarded along that street.
They do.
So I think if we did something like promoting, if we were allowed to promote that we're going to have the planning department come and discuss historical relevance and designation, that if there's some way we could get word out about that, that I think we could have, packed house here in the morning, and a lot of people would be interested in that, and that could start kicking off relevance. And if there's something then we'd be able to put out, that doesn't, affect us with any way in sunshine laws, but we could put out there saying, we're passionate about this, and find out what we can do, and then put it out via the website or any social media, things like that. And I know that Main Street Vero Beach would be willing to help promote that as well. I know they're very active on social media. I think that would be a great way to get people involved.
Good ideas. I'm not a brochure fan myself. I think that's very old school. But I think having a big banner or two, even downtown, we could put something in the Main Street office, a poster, a banner, and maybe even we have street banners. I mean, why couldn't you have one of the medallion, the historic marker, and just with designate on it, and get people at least to see it, and then to see it again, it would reinforce that kind of curiosity and make them research it and wonder what they're missing.
I think that's a great idea. I know Main Street did. They took pictures and said this place matters, and
Right.
went along to different places downtown. So I think things like that, and if, there's a way we could do banners or anything such as that, could be very beneficial, especially with people walking downtown and doing the historic tours. I know that there is a lot of relevance being brought back down to downtown, and people, more foot traffic. So that could definitely spark an interest.
Tammy, they're not expensive, but can we somehow find money in the budget to crank out a few banners?
Are you speaking of big banners, or, because, the different sizes does make a difference in what the prices are. I found that out with dealing with the Centennial this year.
Well, whatever we can manage.
What has been most effective, do you think? What kind of?
I have found that taking the one Centennial banner that I have that is compacted, and we just take it and you raise it up and
It's
you put
that
it anyway.
pull-up thing.
Yeah,
I like
that
those.
is very functional. So maybe I can do some pricing on that and see if there's anything in my budget that could,
The
we could
centennial
spend
budget?
that on. Pardon?
The centennial budget?
No, the city clerk's budget. You can't touch the Centennial budget. That's all sponsorship.
Okay.
But
Those
yeah,
things are very
and maybe I can work with planning. I know maybe there was a little bit of money in there also, so we could come up with something.
Okay.
Those are very flexible,
They
those things.
are. They're easy to carry around.
Yeah, that's, ultimately, we had discussed maybe doing a doorway that could be assembled, with a plaque on it, and I just think it would have been too much trouble to set up, and with our luck, it would have fallen over on somebody, and that would have been...
We don't want that.
So maybe a banner and a big poster is a better idea. Back when we had our 90th, we did a board. I brought that. We could even, feature homes on a poster. And this was much larger and sat in the lobby here for a while. I don't know what became of it, but but that was the small version. So the other thing we don't have to talk about in detail, but I wanted you to just consider it also, is we don't really have an award of merit for responsible historic preservation. And when I pulled up the City of Daytona, I discovered the one that they're just beginning, I guess, to implement. And, or at least I got that impression. And many cities do a version of this, and I just thought yours was ideal. We might just copy it completely. So going forward, rather than using, and certainly as I hammered out the proclamation for Mr. Conrado's historic gallery collection of photos, it occurred to me that, of course, that could have been one that would have garnered an award. We're using the proclamation, because we have no other means of honoring him right now. But certainly, we would not be able to use a proclamation for everything that comes up in the future, so this would be a good thing to develop and to have at the ready. And maybe Daytona does it twice a year. People, I think, send in nominations or
This is for
somehow
recognition?
for appropriate, restorations, anything that honors the historic significance.
That was, I wasn't too involved with it. That's Doug, I think I know, was more
That was your
involved with it.
Mr. Liaison, huh?
Yeah. And that was something new they were starting. So, but I can find out more about it.
It seems pretty straightforward, actually.
Right. And I think they were probably copying it from another city. So.
And our city did that for years, it was probably stopped about 15 years ago.
The Mayor Award?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Remember when Tom White was in office, he was doing the renovation awards, and the citizens would send us applications on the recommendations, and I'd be glad to pull out that file if you want to look at it.
That would be great if we could look at that and maybe borrow some from that as well.
And the awards are promotion opportunities once they're given.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything that gets it out there and gets people involved and makes it familiar is good. Good. So everyone agrees that would be useful, and perhaps, at the next meeting, we're going to be going over the designation process with Jason, so maybe we'll wait till January next year, make that a next year goal. I am not going to review Chairman's matters. I largely wanted to just reflect on the year that's passed and the fact that we have spent a huge amount of time struggling with the Dodgertown crisis, and as far as a learning experience goes, it was wonderful to see the community get up and get involved to the extent that they did. I don't recall any other time in recent history where we've had such an overwhelming response to needs. So that was wonderful. Anytime you have government involving its people, we're here for them. So that was nice. But again, in the future, we'd like to see more guidance on this end and identification of our special properties so that it doesn't have to be quite so grueling. Any members' matters?
Not from me.
All right, seeing none. And staff, do you have anything additional to offer us today?
I think so.
Well, we'll settle for Jason. That's going to work today. All right, well, shall we set next month's meeting? Shall we just say the typical first Thursday?
Sure.
And we'll leave it at that.
And we look forward to the presentation.
We do. We certainly do. So thank you, Jason. It's wonderful to have you here with us. Thank you, Anna, for your time today.
Is there any way that we could get that out to let people know that at the next Historic Preservation Commission meeting that Jason will be here speaking about that? Is there any way that we could kind of get that out to the community?
Notice that?
It's on the agenda. We know all are on the agenda. It would be included on the agenda. All city council meetings, all city meetings are included on the city's website. there's no special, that I'm aware of, special place to do separate notices. But, I mean,
We do have a little special place on the website that we could put it on there if you wanted to. That at
On
the
the
next
homepage?
HPC meeting, there's going to be a presentation.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
is
would
that something
help.
we would be allowed to share, like, let's say, on social media or anything like that, just saying?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
look,
it's,
this is
yes,
happening?
yes. The difficulty this board has, I mean, it's not a violation of sunshine for you to share what's already out there. That's not the issue. And also, it's not the issue of it being sunshine for this. You are considered a regulatory board. That's why you can't help people. You can't regulate the people that you're helping. So it's not a sunshine issue, that's a regulatory issue. You're designated as a regulatory board.
But we could all put on our Facebook page PSA.
Yeah, yes, that's not...
Open to the public. We encourage
Yes, I
you.
mean, that's perfectly acceptable.
And I will be in France the first Thursday of December.
It's actually the second Thursday.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay, great.
Does the city have a capability to reach out to the news media on things like that?
Sure. I have a list of the different media that we work with. I'd be glad to notice them about the meeting if you'd like me to.
Great, that would be very helpful.
I think that'd be helpful.
Thanks,
They'd
Tammy.
probably put it in the what's coming up section. Thanks, Tammy.
Good idea, Steve. Okay, last call. Anything?
Yeah.
We're finished? Good. All right, thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.